All right. So if I were to bring you, let's say, into a high school auditorium or a gym as a guest speaker, with some 12th grade senior students who are soon to head off into the world, and you get to kind of inspire, motivate, or teach them, what is a story that you would tell during your talk?
Well, not so much a story actually. I think universally, like the education system is a little bit backward, and there's like I think three or four key areas that schools really seem to forget to talk to their students about. It was certainly like this for me, and I've spent the best part of my adult life like trying to figure a lot of this stuff out. And they're the four pillars. So around wealth, health, love, and happiness. I don't know why, but so few schools actually teach their students about this. And I think if I had a room, an auditorium full of like young people about to embark on this amazing journey, the start of their adult lives, heading out there into this strange, world that we live in, I'd say go and buy a book on love, go and buy a book on wealth, go and buy a book on health, go and buy a book on happiness, and study them. I can recommend books on all four of those sorts of areas, and start to just get really curious about like just these things that I think people, when you're young, you think that the most important thing to you is like going out and with your friends and like starting to go to bars and like picking up girls and things like that, whatever your interests are. And I know times have changed quite dramatically. People are into different things nowadays from when I was sort of growing up 25 plus years ago. um, but I think if people just got curious and studied these sort of, they'll soon quickly realize that actually financial security is like massively important. Having healthy relationships is like hugely impacts your ability to have a successful, happy life. Finding things which actually really fill you up. Like too many people chase money, for example. I know I talked about wealth being one of them, but they do it for the wrong reasons. They do it for the money, but what they don't understand is how to build like long-term wealth creation for themselves. They start to borrow money, they'll take out credit cards, they'll get into student debt, they'll do all sorts of things and then regret it further down the line, like I did. I'd wish to educate our youngsters about just those four pillars, and I think schools should be doing a better job as well, if I'm honest.
If we take the pillar of happiness, you mentioned that you could share a resource, whether sharing a resource or just sharing a little more of what you've understood about that pillar that you kind of wish you had learned in those teen years yourself, specific to happiness, what would be one of those learnings?
I think the Japanese culture, the Japanese people have got it kind of nailed. So they have a framework called ikigai, which they work to, which essentially is a four overlapping circles, which are around. I'm going to probably misquote these, but there's a book called Ikigai, which is like the perfect guide on it. But it's around like having a mission, doing something that you're passionate about, adding some value, like bringing some extra value to the world, whilst also having a profession which you can follow. And again, the misconceptions are like around the profession, for example, we think that it's just about making money. It's not. What Japanese people do is when they're living by by the philosophy of ikigai, the idea is that whatever it is that they're doing, they should have all four corners of this quadrant sort of overlapping to achieve ikigai. So even if once they go through a successful career, maybe working, when they get to retirement age, they have to find a profession that they can do in their retirement to continue like ikigai, basically. So that could be volunteering in the local community as a profession, a thing which you do daily. It adds value to the world. You can get some, it has some kind of a purpose or mission behind it. So I think ikigai is a great philosophy to work to. But again, there's also I don't know if you're familiar with. There's a guy called Ali Abdul. He's also written a book recently called Feel Good Productivity, which is it's a fantastic philosophy around how to live a life in a way that you can be productive, but in a way that also feels good. Because you can get so caught up if you get into debt and take out a mortgage and have children, and things start to, they're not necessarily burdens, but then there is some element of responsibility. You end up kind of just getting into the system and doing things because you need to survive, as opposed to actually like setting out to thrive. So Ali's philosophy around feel good productivity is like focus on the things that actually bring you joy and fill you up, as opposed to just doing things because you have to do them.
I love that he used productivity as a word in the title of the book because I think it's great for search. It's great for keywords. It shows up in a library because everyone wants productivity. I have a few books behind me on the art of productivity. Getting Things Done is a classic book in that area. Yet, for the people who kind of hate the word productivity because they're much more into the mindfulness of how we flow in our lives and become creators and really do the ikigai, they're almost like somewhat counterintuitive to each other. And I appreciate that Ali took that direction with the book. That feel good part is really what we're talking about there. I think that can be hard for the beginner to appreciate because maybe they don't have the wealth figured out yet, or they uh, don't even know where to begin because productivity is like a definition they hardly understand yet, and things of that nature. When it comes to your productivity or ikigai, um, I'm sure the journey didn't start where you are now, of course, but how do you define your ikigai and your feel good productivity right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate that through my career that's led me to sort of coaching other business owners now. So, there's happy accidents which kind of happen along the way, but right now I've discovered something which I'm deeply passionate about, helping other business owners to grow their business, and in a way that not many other business coaches actually do. So my thing is about pricing and money mindset. A lot of business owners, for example, they'll charge based on what they do, but not necessarily what that means to the end client. So in terms of like the dream outcome which it delivers to their end client, and it's beautiful watching the light bulb go off where my clients finally get it, that they're like, oh, it's not about me, this is about what I do for other people. So it's kind of like quite meta because I'm doing that for other people, and they're thinking about the results they get for other people, and then it passes down the chain, and then they think about what they're doing for their clients, and so it kind of continues. And I have this rule as well, like when I started the coaching practice, because I used to run a marketing agency, and it was fantastic. It was a really successful local agency, but I had a team of four slightly dysfunctional people, and I had like, probably because they worked with me, I would imagine, but and about 150 clients, which effectively, because I didn't know back then what I know now about business, effectively were 150 bosses, and we were doing all sorts of late nights and just the constant. We kind of did a lot of the grind and the hustle type work, and again, my motives weren't necessarily aligned with like ikigai or feel good productivity at the time. I didn't know about those concepts, and I just burnt out. Just got to a point where I was like, between daughters, fed up, just wanted to. It just wasn't fulfilling anymore. It didn't feel good anymore. So I was fortunate in that moment where I decided that I was going to close the agency down. That somebody came along and saw value in my clients and some of the IP which I'd created, so I was able to sell it. Um, and the best thing I think which I did at the time was, rather than, up until that point, I'd been going out like on the hunt. I was going out trying to create something, trying to force something to happen. When I sold it, I didn't have to show up to my agency anymore, and I had like 3 months where I had some money. I didn't really need to do anything. My second daughter had just been born. I was able to really kind of focus on what filled me up, basically, like refined like what I enjoyed doing. And it so happened that I started doing some informal mentoring with some other business owners because they'd heard that I'd sold my agency and they kind of wanted to do something similar. Um, and in the first sort of 3 or 4 clients that I started working with, I was like, there was that bit in the agency I absolutely loved. But at the time, I didn't think anybody else valued it, because every time I tried to bring up the business strategy conversation with a client, they're always like, "No, no, Rob, I just want you to build me a website." So I never felt valued like for that. But I was looking for external validation for my clients, not just doing it because I enjoyed talking about the strategy piece. So it's like big light bulb flashed like the moment I started doing coaching and mentoring with clients, because I was like, oh, people do actually value this other piece of like my brain, my thoughts around business and productization and pricing and sales and stuff like that. I liken it to, do you surf? Have you ever been surfing at all?
No, but I'd love to try.
So do try, because it's one of the best feelings when you catch your first wave and you stand up and you're kind of there, and then like everybody's like high-fiving and hollering, like shouting and stuff. The concept, have you been in, you must have been in the ocean though at some point.
Well, what I can compare it to is the first time that I tried water skiing and wakeboarding, or if you want to go heavy Canada winters, snowboarding.
Okay, cool. Well, snowboarding I don't know much about. We'll try and work with it. If not, I'll revert back to like surfing. But with take snowboarding for example, there's probably like conditions. There's like kind of ideal conditions for like. This is where my noddy knowledge around snowboarding and snow comes into it. But like people talk about powder, don't they? It's got to have the right powder, the right. There's got to be snowfall, like the night before, for example, fresh powder. Probably don't want to get it halfway up the mountain and it'd be shrouded in mist. It'd be a really rubbish session if you can't see like where it is you're like skiing or snowboarding down a mountain, right? So there's these certain conditions which have to happen in order for you to have an enjoyable experience, but also for it to be productive. So I'll come back to surfing because it's the analogy I know better. But where a wave is created, it's created because the momentum is captured in the swell of the ocean, the swells of the ocean, and they reach the beach, and then that energy, because it can't go anywhere, it goes upwards, and that's where the wave is formed, and then it crashes. So that's the first condition. We have to have swell, and it has to hit. The second condition is it has to hit the beach at the right angle. The third condition is we need an offshore wind. So we need the wind coming into the face of the wave in order to hold, like make it stand up. Okay, and then the next condition, the fourth condition, is then you need to make sure you're in the right position on your board so that you can then, as the swell comes in, paddle like stink. Hopefully, then fifth condition, get your timing right and stand up. Like if you're me, I fall off a lot. I get the standing up bit right, but I get the falling off bit even spot on. So in this kind of analogy, imagine there's no swells, or imagine that there's an onshore wind, so the waves just falling flat. So there's no, or I see this with a lot of business owners and people in jobs as well. The conditions are all wrong, or there's no swell. It's like pan flat, and they're paddling like crazy trying to force momentum. And when there's no conditions, like no matter how hard you paddle, you're never going to be able to catch a wave, right? You're just wasting energy. So these like times when things are quiet, that's a really great opportunity rather than forcing things to happen, just to regather yourself, regroup, and then eventually, if you wait long enough, the correct conditions will happen. A set of waves will come through with the swells, the wind will change direction. You'll have re-energized yourself, so you're not so tired. You can actually paddle into that wave now, and then have a go at catching it. And I think just too many people in life are just too busy paddling, and they're not looking around them at like, are the conditions right?
And one of the difficult ways that I've thought about this a little more than explained it to people, because I can be a bit harsh, is kind of living that sort of zombie life where you're kind of wandering around, you're going through the actions, and you're so um, almost disassociated for some people because we just get into the routine and the rut and the motions. And I've had people that I've been fortunate to mentor and support over the years that a lot of times you'll sit on a park bench and maybe have this discussion about life, and these light bulbs start to go off where they start to recognize like, oh yeah, I'm not doing what I want to do, and maybe I've been doing this for hopefully like 3 years, but in some case it's like 23 years. And it can be a really difficult awakening because people sort of feel regret and guilt around the fact that they pursued that. To use another metaphor, is that ladder leaning up against the wrong building or the wrong castle, and they've climbed that for so long. I definitely fall into that category and can share a fair bit about it. When it comes to the piece about in the ocean and surfing, and I mentioned that I could relate with wakeboarding. An interesting thing about that relates is in wakeboarding, people, if they haven't driven the boat before, think that you probably need to go fast because it's going to be more fun, like you're tubing on the water, when in reality you have to slow down. You can't go too slow because then the person won't be able to get up. You have to be in between where you create that really nice huge wake, and similar to what you're saying, those conditions become ideal and optimal. The big difference is it's not natural. It's man-made. It's created. You have a boat, you fill that boat up with gas, you have this probably man-made lake as well, and you're going around creating those conditions. So, I think what's interesting about all of this is we could stumble into it naturally, but a lot of times you probably have to create these conditions for clients. When people are struggling with figuring out um, what the heck they want to do or creating those conditions, like how do you start helping people get clarity?
I mean, the first thing is just a reality check, you know, almost like a reset the GPS. Are we even in the right place? Like you're not going to be able to do any wakeboarding if you're like 5 miles inland, for example, you know, and there's no lakes around, no boats, right? So it's just actually that check in to see where am I at right now in relation to like where I want to get to. And then figuring out there's always going to be blockers. So I can give a practical example of this, and you may well have some experiences that you can share as well. But you know, I it's going to sound very, very British now, Justin. So apologies. Right, I'm going to talk about the weather. Right, we've had the worst summer so far ever. It's just been wet, cold, grey, and miserable, and it's like I love this. I need the sunshine to refuel like over the summer. If I don't get that, I'm miserable as anything. Like as we head into the winter, I'm like, oh god, 6 months of winter is looming, right? So I probably in an ideal world I would have been born in like you know the Balearic Islands in like the Mediterranean or something like that, just somewhere just that little bit warmer, not so warm, but just warm enough that I'd be content for 9 months of the year rather than three. But all of a sudden you look at well, actually, I'm based in the Cotswolds in the UK. Both my daughters are in school. My wife's very settled in her job. All of our friends and family are here, so it's kind of like it makes it really bloody hard sometimes to create the right conditions. So it's kind of like what would you be prepared to do in order to kind of at least take the first small step towards doing that? So um, my wife and I made a commitment that right, we'll just book some really nice holidays. So at least we get to experience it for a part of the year, even if we can't do it sort of permanently. We get the benefits of the best education and healthcare system I think probably the world's got to offer, you know, compared to most countries in the world. And we can also, I mean, I have to also recognize that I'm probably slightly privileged. I went to a private school, I went to university, white, middle class. My parents worked incredibly hard up from sort of working class up to middle class. You know, I'm privileged. I'm lucky. I'm very fortunate to get to where I've got to. Equally, I've also had to work bloody hard to get some of the things which I've got as well, to earn the rights to go on holidays and things like that. So I think the reality check of where you're at. What are some of the obstacles that have kind of got you stuck with where you're at the moment? What are the first, you know, what's the first smallest step that you can take towards like, you know, moving towards where it is that ideally you would want to get to? And there's some really interesting. There was something, I know this is unrelated perhaps to your question, but there was something which you said about happiness in your previous question. There was a study, and I wish I could remember where it was. I'll try and dig it out, so perhaps we can share it in the show notes. But there was a happiness study. So they looked at people from 18 through to the age of, I think it was up to 80, which is the average sort of age Western culture where, you know, lifespan. And there's a big dip. And the dip at the peak is 42. Funny enough, is exactly where I'm at the moment. Now, this sounds like a pretty like sad story for anybody who's like hit their 40s with kids, married, you know, all of those sorts of conditions, right? But the nice thing is when you kind of know it, knowing is like the most useful bit of information because it's like, right, well, I know that's the case now. How can I avoid that? Or what can I do to kind of move out of it? But yeah, literally from the age of 18, your happiness dips. You hit middle age, like mid 40s, and you're at the lowest ebb, the most unhappy. It's where most divorces happen in that 42 to 45 age bracket. It's where male suicide is at its highest, 42 to 45. You know, and there's that grind, that routine. Isn't it any wonder that because for 200 days of the year, us 42-year-old parents of two people are getting up every morning, doing bed, like brushing the teeth, doing breakfast, packing the lunches, doing the school run. We get home, we cram in our day into like 6 hours, me and my wife, because that's all we've got. And then kids come home, tea time, bedtime, bath time, you know. So that, and we 200 times a year. Imagine doing that on repeat 200 times a year. I did not get it. I had a business partner in my first business. He had kids 10 years before mine came along. I was like, why are you always off ill? Why are you always so tired? Like, why have you never got time to focus on the business? Why I just did not. Non-parents just do not get this at all. And literally, like within a week of my first daughter Poppy arriving, me and Caleb, my business partner, we're still very good friends to this day. We've known each other for like 25 years now. Even through my first job, that's where we met. And the first thing I said to him, we met her for lunch about a week or two after Poppy had been born. I said, "Man, I'm so sorry." I said, "I had no idea what you were going through, and I couldn't. It chokes me up. I feel really sad that I had such a lack of empathy, but also it's just part of the process, right, of life and learning about kids and all of the stuff that kind of comes along with that like growing up, basically."
And he probably had to decide to just find a way to tune you out or handle the relationship so that he could focus on his kids. Maybe if he was doing well by them, because that's one of the tough things. I've worked with a lot of non parents too. And in some of those cases, they're not going to have kids either. So they won't end up having that sort of moment of reflection where they realize, like, oh, this is what you are going through.
Mm,
And for me, it's been really difficult because we've had moments where our daughter's been hospitalized for like a week straight, for example. A lot of times where I've had to just tune out the noise and focus on her, which can be really difficult when we're goal oriented people.
yeah.
We have this, real mindset around wanting to achieve things. The last time that my podcast fell off a little bit was because I had just recorded all these amazing episodes, and then our kids were going through some really difficult acute moments of struggle, and I had to like, I could have kept it going at their sacrifice, but I had to decide, for now I have to just be 100% dad, and then I can go back to 90-10 in a couple weeks time. um we're both girl dads. We talked about feel good productivity a little bit, and I know that you are a big time goal oriented person. How do you feel about the uh myth of balance, if you will?
Yeah, well, work-life balance doesn't it's BS. Quite frankly, it's. I don't think it's something that you can ever achieve. I think it's just like you said. Use the word balance there, right? So it is just about trying to get the best balance, and that will be different for every single person. I admire. Like I've actually always I don't know how deep you kind of want to go with this conversation. I don't know what's going to be beneficial. So do stop me if I start going off on a tangent and it's not something you feel will be beneficial. But I've always struggled with parenthood. I found it really bloody hard. Just probably because of my upbringing, there's a bit of trauma in there. I won't go too deep into that, but it's made it really hard for me to be a dad and a present husband and things like that. And these are things that I'm aware of and I'm working on. Business, I've always found it comes easy to me, but I've realized that's because probably I'm hiding from something in my dad life, husband life that I need to be responsible for as well. I think it's about having the presence of mind to have like the awareness of where it is that you're spending your time, who you're spending it with, where your energy is getting replenished, where it's getting depleted. And for me, like I think, especially for men, something that actually not. I think actually it's harder for women, especially women with children. But guilt-free time off is something which just doesn't come naturally to people in like the 21st century. There's so many distractions, not least like social media and YouTube and all these reality TV programs and Lamborghinis and shiny things, right? That just massive distractions. Um, but um, having guilt-free time off, I think, because we're so desensitized to spending time alone with ourselves, um, most people just really struggle with it. So hit a simple exercise. So you've been through a lot of struggles by the sound of it yourselves with your daughter's health at various parts. One really simple exercise which I found that anybody can do at any point, and it shows that the power of your brain, the power of your thoughts, it's a two-part thing. So one side of it is a truths exercise, because your energy gets depleted when things like a fight, flight, freeze response, fear response starts to come in, where you feel you're getting judged by other people, or spending too much time doing other things for other people. So your energy starts to get depleted at that point. But it's because we forget about who we are because we're busy serving other people. So the truths exercise is all about reminding yourself of all of the things that you know categorically 100% to be true about yourself that nobody could ever take away from you. Right? So in your case, you've got daughters. that you love very much. You have a house which you own. You have I don't know if you did a degree, you have certifications qualifications which you've got. You have your podcast. You have like you know that these things exist, and nobody can ever take that away from you. And sometimes just doing a bit of a reset and reviewing that truths document. I have a Google Doc with all of the stuff, all of my truths listed out, and I add to it regularly. It's massively empowering. It just fills you back up. You're like, no, I'm a good person. I've done all this amazing stuff. Um, and then the second part of it then is because living in a fear state, and anything can trigger it. It could be somebody cutting you up, when you're taking your kids to school, or it could be your partner says something to you just out of the blue, which they didn't mean to, but that just in a stressful moment they said something which they didn't mean, or something like that, and the emotions start to come up. But just closing your eyes for a moment, and I go through a process where just it's not really like it's not like a hypnosis or anything like that, or meditation. It's more so just a gentle sort of check-in and reminder. So you take 2 or 3 really deep breaths, and even just like let out like a really loud like sigh at the end of it. And like really plant yourself like you're sat down at the moment. So feel the seat like supporting you. It's coming up underneath you and it's supporting you. Your feet like firmly planted on the ground. Just feel really just strong, filling your lungs up with air. And then just think about for a moment the fact that no matter what happens right now in this moment, no matter what has happened in the past, or even what's going to happen in the future, you have right now a roof over your head, you've got food in your fridge, and your family is safe. And keep breathing into that. Got a roof over our head, got food in the fridge, family's safe. We're okay. Right now, we're okay. And the thoughts, they'll kind of drift in and out. They'll come and go, right? And the bit which trips people up is they judge those thoughts. They see them as good thoughts or bad thoughts, right? And you just don't judge the thoughts, allow them to drift in and out. And then just like a fleeting moment, it's like a shooting star, a little moment. You get those just 40 milliseconds of calm, inner peace. I don't know if you were doing that exercise then as I was kind of going through it, but did you capture just tiny little nanosecond of like inner peace and calm, tranquility?
I absolutely did. I did the exercise while you were saying it. I think that was perfect. And I had moments of negative reflection too, like flashbacks to times where that exercise maybe wouldn't have worked, but then I was able to bring myself back to that place where it is working for now. To your point, I'm able to stay grounded in the moment and at this time have gratitude. I think that exercise is a really good example of how you do a great job of combining metaphor, story, and practical application as well, because you could have easily said some fluffy things about how to be more productive or just left it at balance doesn't work, but you gave a really good practical example, which I think is really helpful. And when you asked about the idea of going deep on the show, um, I feel like, well, similar to what Ali said to you on his show that's actually called Deep Dive, this one's not called that. But I always feel as a host that it's important to go beyond the surface when it comes to these topics, because
Mm.
I know you've been on a lot of podcasts. You've probably been asked a million times the question, well, how does somebody start a business? Like, give me the 7 steps, and you could rattle them off really quickly. Of course, people waiting for that cliffhanger moment. We'll get to that. But I think it's really important that we talk about some of the story and the things that come up in the moment for you. And as you were sharing that exercise, one of the things that it made me think a bit about was, oh, you mentioned the fleeting moments and how we need to kind of let those thoughts float by. And even if they enter our mind, let them float on by. And one of the things that I've been really big into is the psychology of golf, the sports psychology of the mindset as it relates to the sport of golf. Like, I think it's such an incredibly powerful metaphor for life.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I'm mentoring someone, and even it's my own kids, they don't know all the things I'm stealing from are like golf mindset tips 101. And one of them that I used to use when I competed in the sport was looking up at the sky and seeing the clouds float by and trying to attach your negative, self deprecating thoughts to those clouds. And so letting your negative thoughts, letting the devil on your shoulders inputs just float by like the clouds in the sky. And over the course of 18 holes, 4 hours, you have to do that 1,000 times. Um, on that topic, it made me think of your book, Take Your Shot, because um, it's about golf, but it's also about business. And I'm curious. You wrote that really well to bring this full circle because it's story. It's also practical application, and you even said at the beginning, like if you want to skim through and get to the exercises, this is how you could do it. How much of that overall narrative was related to your personal journey in building your business?
Oh, do you know what? You should get a prize for that, because that's one of my favorite questions I think I've ever been asked on a podcast in all of the podcasts I've done. Um, Quite a lot actually, and I'm not sure people. I don't want to do like a spoiler alert, because obviously I'm going to gift some signed copies to your listeners as well. So I'll try not to give the game away too much, so they get some enjoyment out of the book as well. So that it was told as a like a parable basically, and there was a few commercial reasons because of like the size of the book and how I structured it. But there were some great books I read when I got into sort of self and personal development. So Built to Sell, which is on my shelf over there, which has like a hallowed place on my shelf because it's one of my favorite books of all time, by an author called John Warlow. It was told as a story. There's a book called The Go-Giver, told as a story. Another book called Go for No, told as a story. The E-Myth by Michael Gerber is majority told as a story. I think stories just really give you an opportunity to kind of, when you're reading it, immerse yourself in like the characters within that story and go along with the journey, and you can see how it aligns to your own personal set of circumstances. So Russ, who is like the main character in that story, he's actually a real guy. He was one of my first coaching clients, and we got to by about page 72. There is a bit of artistic license with where the story goes. Again, I won't give it away, but it was interesting when I started to sort of tell Russ's story and how he meets this coach, and the coach starts to introduce him to these 5 business concepts. It was really dry. The first versions of it, I did the first chapter like 3 times, and I was like, this is just dry. I just couldn't feel myself getting into it. And it's just because whilst I'd coached Ross, I didn't know deeply how, on an emotional level, how he was feeling in all of the different transitions that he went on his journey. So the only person I could draw on was my own story, having been in business for like 20 odd years. So it's quite emotional. I found myself crying, and even now, like recalling it when I was reading the audiobook, because I did that myself. I just burst into tears several times, like recalling the story, because I was drawing from my own emotions on that, going through it. I take much offense. There was somebody on Goodreads who left they didn't like my accents and my storytelling abilities on the audiobook, but thankfully it was only one person. And I kind of laughed. I was like, well, that's quite funny in a way that, I'm not like a Shakespeare type actor. I have a British accent, and I tried to ham up the characters, but it did make me chuckle when I read that. I was like, that's not what I was going for, but never mind. So yeah, so that, like, and I think people underestimate as well, like, again, especially men, we don't share our feelings very much. So some of the nicest comments I've had have been from men who've read the book and just gone, to me, I felt like somebody finally got me when I read your book, because it was like I was Russ. So for men to be able to share things like that, I think as well, is quite an achievement, out of writing a book, which initially was just going to be a business book, and then I just let it evolve.
You mentioned the 4 pillars at the beginning, and one of them was wealth. The first one that you mentioned, I believe. Russ's journey takes him on a journey from not really understanding wealth in a sense to figuring it out a little more with the coaches, aka your help. And I think a handy thing that can be difficult because of the curse of knowledge and, you being 25 years into a coaching career, perhaps to just even explain and define what the heck does wealth mean first before we talk about how Russ or, many of your other clients have figured it out.
Yeah, I think one of the most common things which I hear people say, both in business and personally, is, "Oh, I've got a cash flow problem." They don't, because cash flows in, it flows straight back out again. uh, the whole process around sort of wealth creation, and I've had to learn this the hard way. And I should clarify as well, by no means sort of, we're doing okay, but I'm no like multi-millionaire driving around in a flash car and all this sort of stuff. I'm still on this journey myself, but it's always about learning, isn't it? I just didn't want to mislead people to thinking that I'm like super successful, mega rich, and all this sort of stuff. It's like, no, I'm just a normal guy, on the same journey. But yeah, money flows in, money flows straight back out again. So actually, there's two problems people have. They have a problem about understanding how to make and create more wealth, make more money, and then they also have a massive problem with keeping hold of it. Not least because things are expensive these days after all the various sort of economic upturns and downturns and COVID and the rest of it. Um, but when you start to realize that when you sell your time, which is essentially what a job is, and then many people in business, they sell time for money, because they're selling like a service by the hour or whatever it might be. Um, well, the only way I can kind of put this into like some kind of context is like, do you mind me asking, how old are you at the moment?
I don't mind you asking if I can remember or not, being such a power of now person. I'll be 40 in the fall.
40 in the fall. Okay, so congratulations, because that's a big milestone. So let's imagine, right, you're 80, and now I'm going to age you a little bit more than that. I'm going to give you a bit more life. Let's say you're 87 and you're on your deathbed, right? Family are all around you, and you have to sell the final hour of your life. You have to put a dollar figure on it, right? You have to sell it. How much would you sell that final hour of your life for?
I I could probably answer this question for an hour because I feel like I could take it in so many directions in that.
Let's keep it simple, just a number.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I just think it's priceless, but I would sell it for, um, maybe $1 million if it gave my daughters a little bit of a head start in life.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that $1 million. Now that I've asked you this question, and you'll start to think about it, and you'll have conversations with your daughter and your family and stuff like that, that number will grow. It will gradually get bigger. The closer you get to 87, that number will grow and grow and grow. I'm currently at about, I think, about 100 million. That's my number at the moment for my final hour. Because I'm assuming that I've spent a bit of time teaching my daughters about generational wealth and wealth creation, and not giving without take, and various other concepts like that around like doing good in the world. So 100 million gives several generations worth of wealth, that they can then do something great with. Basically, that's the way I look at it. And that's how much it would cost me now to not spend that last hour with my girls and my family, right? I started off, I think I was, a million, 2 million, 3 million. Like, it was, relatively low. And I started thinking about this about 5 years ago. But why is every hour of our life worth any less than that? Why do we treat it like selling ourselves for like minimum wage, like 12.50 an hour, or, a salary of like $35,000 a year or whatever it might be? Like, and the thing is as well, like most businesses in a capitalistic sort of market, you're building somebody else's dream when you take on the role and responsibility of a job. Unless you work as a public servant, you're actually doing some good. But let's face it, only a tenth of the people tend to work in sort of good public services, like education and health and fire brigade and armed forces and stuff like that. So it's quite interesting when you start to think about like the value of like every hour that you're selling, and you can never make more time. You can always make more money. Um, so I don't know where I was kind of going with this really, but I think like wealth creation for me is about, okay, how can I elevate the value of every minute, hour, day that I live on this planet, doing good, but also building some wealth so that there's some good that's going to come back further down the line for my future generations. Um, And I think Simon Squibb is quite a good example of this. I don't know if you've ever come across him, but he's a British guy. He sold a business for ridiculous sums of money out in Hong Kong. So much so he never has to work another day in his life. But he set about this mission, building Help Bank, just a fantastic platform that you can go on there and people post questions. You can just offer advice and help them out, and you can do it for free. And he pays people as well periodically, like gives like cash windfalls to people who've like topped the leaderboard on it for helping people and stuff. But his whole thing is like give without take, give without the expectation of getting anything else back in return. When you start to live like abundantly like that, understanding how the value of your time, how that money trickles down through either your personal or business bank account, your profit and loss, and then what you can actually, how you can leverage that money to then get more resources back out of it. The whole thing is quite fascinating when you start to break it down. I'm not an economist. I couldn't explain probably a lot of the maths and science behind like wealth creation. It's not what I'm here on this planet to do. My job is to just help people to see that they're worth more like today than they were yesterday, basically, in whatever it is that you're doing. But you can also do that aligned with doing some good for the world. Like I'm reaching a point where I like bankers because they pay a shit ton of tax. That's the only good thing that comes out of the banking and capitalistic sort of society, right? And so few of them choose to do any good with that money. They just splurge it on like shiny things, and it's like it's actually quite sickening when you start to kind of look inside that world. Um, and it's really nice seeing. I've got lots of friends who were in finance, so they understand how to create wealth. They come out of finance, and now they're putting that wealth and knowledge to like good use. And I think that's admirable. And I think more people should be doing like thinking like that.
When you asked me the question, the reason why I got stuck a little bit was because if I look to my left, there's a painting that my dad made that has both of my younger brother's ashes in it. One died at 32 of a car
Oh
accident,
wow,
and one died at 34 of a heart attack.
gosh.
Um, in that case, we gathered around his bed, like you see in the movies, had to decide to take him off of the machines and all that.
Mm,
And even prior to that, I was a live-in nanny for my aunt when she wanted to go back to work because her husband, my uncle, was someone who I really looked up to. He passed away when his kids were 1, 3, and 5. And later on, she needed someone to look after the kids. When she first returned to work, she paid for my first year of university in exchange. And um, I've always had this feeling like Mac Miller, the hip hop artist, sort of like that I'm gonna die young. And it's something that I've had to share at therapy and like work through right since I was a kid. Um, and that runs deep. Speaking of, do we go deep on the show? But the reason I share that is because when you asked about that final hour of life, it was hard for me to just give a hypothetical answer and not feel those feelings of like, if I make it to 87, man, like every prediction that I have is out the window because I really feel like it'll be a lot younger than that. Uh, and I work through that mental health obstacle because I'll say things to my therapist like, I just want to make it to see my kid's high school graduation, um, which is even difficult for him to hear. Been working with him for over 20 years, which is another insane side story. But because of course he's a lot older, like he's probably nearing 70 and he's never questioned his health or his mortality at the level that I've been doing daily for my entire life. Um, so I feel like the hour that I have now with you or the hour I have tonight with my kids is even more important than the one at 87. Like I'm not even thinking that far off. That being said, I couldn't possibly charge $1 million for something today, which is really fascinating as well, right? Because um,
mm,
I was starting to wrap my mind around what would that number be, and to your point, if the numbers no, if the hour is no less valuable now, I would make the argument it's just as or more valuable now because I can still play basketball with my kids. I'm not just lying in a hospital bed or something.
yeah.
What would that number be now? And that started me down the line of thinking of what is our time worth right now, building wealth. And you mentioned it a little bit, the idea of detaching, your what you do from the hourly exchange.
Mm.
And I think that's one of those big light bulb moments that, again, you understand so well. So it's commonplace to you, but somebody listening to this episode, this may change their life. And so is that w- one of the reasons why you chose the entrepreneurial venture? Why do you promote entrepreneurship and being a business coach? And I'll just mention that I personally was writing about this in my own book recently and said, like, I think everybody should own something, but I'm curious why why you got into it as opposed to doing one of the public service jobs, like you said.
So, like I said, when I sold the agency, I kind of fell into it. But then you have to make a choice, don't you? It's like, do I like this? Do I want to continue doing this? And it got to a point where I was like, no, do want to continue it, and I do have to take this more seriously. So, did the branding, did the website, I called myself a business coach. I had to give it a moniker. Um, but I experimented a bit with the types of clients I was working with in the early years. So I worked with some corporate businesses. I remember I did this is 7.5 years ago. I went to a law firm in a city near to me, had 160 employees, and it was a big business doing, they're doing like 30, 40 million. It's like a fair size. And in fact, it was significantly more than that. It was more like 300 million. Just got my maths wrong there. Um, I'm a t-shirt and jeans guy. You can see t-shirt and jeans going into a big multi-million pound law firm, right? Um, I did a couple of things that were slightly maverick during the. We were doing like I guess like a pilot program just around productivity and goal setting, and again making sure people were just happy in their jobs because they had a really high staff turnover rate. Anyway, word started to spread through the business about what I'd put into place with the pilot team that I'd worked with. And we got amazing results. My team, out of 15 teams in this law firm, my team was the only one where every team member took a holiday in the final month of the financial year at that law firm. That is unheard of in law firms because everything is geared around billable hours and we've got targets to meet. And how dare you take time off in that final month? My team had already hit all their targets. So they were able to take that time off, but people didn't like it. A few other things. I got dragged up into the boardroom by the chairman. I thought I was just going to have a quiet chat with the guy. It turned out they were having a full-on board meeting. I'm there with my t-shirt and jeans on. They're all suited and booted. Grey hair, stale, pale male, right? 12 of them sat around this table. Uh, you're Robin. We've heard some interesting things about your techniques. Tell us about them. And I was like, really sorry, but I don't think this is the right setting for this. I think we should probably be doing like this. I don't feel comfortable like having this conversation the way that it's come about. No, you sit down, Robin. We want to talk about this. As a board, we want to understand what you're doing. It's like, no, I'm not prepared to do that. So my first experience of like corporate world, bigger business was like, ugh, just give me the ick, like dealing with people like that. Contrary to that, complete flip side to that was uh, again, one of my first clients. It was a web designer, a guy called Rich, and he had a wife. They kind of two young kids. They weren't married at that point, renting their house. Amy was working in public sector in the NHS, National Health Service here in the UK, and we worked together for about 3.5 years in total. And through our work together, Rich was able to go and get his first office in the local town. He was able to hire his first person. Amy left her job in the NHS to come and work in the business. They saved up a deposit to buy their first house. They saved up enough money as well to then go and pay for their wedding, which they'd been putting off because they couldn't afford it. So like I had this just wholesome experience of like grassroots business, like me, like family. I was changing the lives of families. And so it's an easy decision at that point. I was like, all right, I'm just going to work with like small one-person businesses, family, small family-run businesses, no more than like, 1 million max revenue. That's like my limit. At that point, I'll hand it over to somebody else because I can see like the changes and the differences in the people's lives that I'm making. And they're like, there's like a bell curve for results you get from coaching, right? So Amy and Rich probably sit at like one end of the bell curve because they're like, just everything worked out really well for them. Most clients kind of have like some results within their business, but it doesn't necessarily transfer across into other aspects of their life. But it's because I can see the results. It's as simple as that, basically.
Do you think anyone could succeed in the world of entrepreneurship? As I ask that, I think of like Daniel Priestley's Entrepreneur Revolution and how pro entrepreneur that was. But really,
Mm.
doesn't if somebody's picking that book off the shelf in the library, actually, I'll take a step back. If they see that shelf on the library, they might not even pick it up because, oh, that's somebody else.
Anybody can be an entrepreneur, but there's a couple of mistakes people make. So the first one, Simon Sinek talks about, and Dan Priestley talks about this as well, actually, in Entrepreneur Revolution, a similar sort of concept. But Simon Sinek talks about the infinite game, and like in a game of football, I don't know how long a game of American football. I was talking about soccer here, not American football. Right? In a game of soccer, you have like two halves, 45 minutes each half. You have 11 players in each team, and one team wins generally, and one team loses, or it might be a draw depending on like the game. But it's finite, right? Whereas in business, it's not like anything is finite. The goal in business is to stay in business for as long as you possibly can do. So the first trait of an entrepreneur is like stability, like longevity. What's their staying power? And the business journey, I think everybody predicts when they start out in business that it looks like that. It's a straight line, heading up into like multi-millionairedom. But it's not. The journey actually is like full of that, and you go backwards and forwards and up and down, and it's like a bit of a wild ride. So being able to tough it out through those dips is a major part of that stickability. And the dips, you just got to be passionate enough about what you do. I've had periods in my business, even I'm a successful business coach. I don't mind calling myself that. Um, where for example, 2023, in the first 8 months of 2023, I enrolled 3 clients. Now, most people would look at that from the outside in and go, well, that's really awful as a business coach. That's really terrible. I had 25 people apply to do some coaching work with me, and 22 of them I decided it just wasn't a good fit. I didn't feel like I'd had enough value for whatever, number of other reasons. And like my thing is about, I want to be able to make the change, help people make the change in their business, in their life. If I genuinely feel like it's not a wise investment for somebody to spend with me, I won't take their money. And there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, in the coaching space, especially. Sorry, I'm going to rant a little bit here, but it's an important message. In not just the coaching space, but in the small business community alone, where people are just like, they're out there just to make as much money as they can, to put food on the table, to pay for their mortgage, like at whatever cost. And I couldn't live with myself if I took somebody's money for those reasons. I would rather, I shouldn't say this, Mrs. Waite's out of earshot, so I can never let her hear me say this. I personally would rather be poor, homeless, and destitute than take somebody's money when I can't help them. There's like this ethical and moral code of conduct, which as business entrepreneurs, we need to sign up to. And unfortunately, there's there's multitude of brilliant business owners and entrepreneurs, but there's also some unscrupulous ones who will take your money and they don't really care what the end result is, and they won't refund you if things go wrong as well, and things like that. Other mistakes about sort of entrepreneurs, they don't really have much clarity around the direction they're heading in. So they don't know who they help, they don't know what their product does, they don't know, they haven't even worked out like the basic economics of like how a business profit and loss stacks up. So I want to earn $100,000. My product is, $1,000. Therefore, I need to enroll 100 clients. That's a basic business plan in about 10 seconds, right? So most business owners don't have that just basic bit of knowledge about understanding the numbers and setting a business plan. And the final thing, which I think stops a lot of people from becoming entrepreneurs and staying with it, is pride. Two separate examples. The first one was a guy who wanted to set up a car washing business, and he was so focused on the fact he needed investment for his business. And I was like, you don't need money to start a business. Oh, but I need to pay for a pressure washer, I need to pay for a hose, and I need to pay for and he listed off all the stuff. I was like, you don't need any of that. I was like, go to any like moderately wealthy neighborhood where they've got two nice cars like parked on the drive, knock on 100 doors and just say to them, listen, I'm thinking about starting up a car washing business. I see you've got two nice cars. They look a bit dirty. Would you let me clean them? And then they'll look at you. And then he was like, oh, but I don't have the kit. I was like, but they've got cars. They probably wash their own car. Like, just borrow their kit. Oh, I couldn't do that. It's like, I look stupid. I was like, don't let pride get in your way. Like, borrow the stuff from the owners. Just say, look, I'm just starting up. If I can clean your cars for $10, it means it's $10 towards getting my own bucket and sponge. The next time I clean your cars, I'll have better kit. But he was just too proud to just like ask to borrow stuff and just make a tenner, right? $10 is not beneath anybody. Like, I don't care what your circumstances or background or anything like that. If you have an idea for a business and you can't just get out there and ask for $10, like, you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And another example of this, slightly different but similar. This guy I was speaking to yesterday got a great idea for a business, which is like these they're fixed washing units on places like beaches and stuff like that, where your dog's gone and like my dog Wilbur did. I went to Watergate Bay down in the south coast, and he rolled in a dead seal carcass. It's honestly, it was gross. It's the most awful thing ever. The idea is then that you would have this mobile washing unit for dogs, basically, so you could hose them off, shampoo them, blow dry them, and stuff. And you tap your card, and off you go. Which is a great idea. But these things cost like 20 or 30 grand, and I was like, and he was like, I'm going to save up loads of money, get my retirement from the police, and then I'm going to spend. I was like, what, are you mad? Like, you don't even know if this is going to work or if there's enough demand or how many dogs are at these beaches or anything like that. So go and do a little bit of research. And I said, why don't you just like get a chalkboard and put like Dan's dog washing services on it? Get like a 50-gallon, roller drum, which you can fill up with water, a battery powered like shower kit, and some shampoo, and sit on a busy beach and see how many people come up to you and want to pay like $10 for a dog wash. And he's like, oh, I didn't think of that. It's like, so, and then he's like, oh, but then I've got to sit on the beach and I've got to wash the dogs. And the idea is it's all going to be self-service. It's like, yeah, you're getting too proud again. Like, you just go and wash some dogs and then have fun doing it. Like, film it, put it on like TikTok or something. Like, make it, somehow find a way to make it fun, and don't think about the money. Like, if you end up washing like 30 dogs in a day, well, clearly there's enough demand. Like, then save up and get the kit. So it's really interesting, like, people's mindset about what they think they need to do versus the reality, what they're prepared to do versus what's required. When you start to kind of look at the sort of DNA and the makeup of like entrepreneurs.
Nerding out about business is one of the most fun things that I do. Like, when you're sharing those examples, I'm like smiling. I almost can't even think of the next question because I'm so excited to just talk about business concepts and ideate. And when you were talking about the firing of clients and like not taking on, a percentage of people who apply for your coaching, it really brought me back to when I was a personal trainer and nutrition and fitness coach 20 plus years ago. People were absolutely shocked. They're almost pissed off when like I didn't want to take them on as clients. But at that point, I had the good fortune and was blessed with the fact that my schedule was pretty full and people were paying me a lot of money. And I was slowly starting to detach my sort of income from service. And I was in a really fortunate spot to be able to say no to people. Really, like, it was just a authentic way of making my business oversubscribed and creating scarcity without having to like falsify that scarcity. And
Yeah.
I don't have that anymore because I left that industry. And so when you share these concepts, it's like it kind of brings a tear to my eye thinking of the day that I hit a little bit of a tipping point in that I feel like I can support my family and I can achieve those same goals in this sort of new economy that I'm choosing to be a part of. Um, when people listen to an episode like this, I think they're hanging on the like, well, give me like, tell me what to do. And in your answer there about the entrepreneur revolution in general, you shared a lot of what not to do, which is typically something I would ask. You shared some really good examples. I just want to make sure that if we ask for like a summary of how to start a business, it can be really quick because I don't think that's really the important part, which is again funny because that's what a lot of people will want to hear.
Yeah.
But what would just be kind of like the really quick steps to do it? Because again, they think of ideas, but they've never actually tried.
So the first thing is like, think about what you love doing, right? And there isn't a lot these days that you can't monetize. I mean, there's a Facebook group with people who collect stickers of fruit, and there's something ridiculous like 18,000 people in that Facebook group, right? So it doesn't matter how wacky the idea is, right? Just find, if it's going to be much easier though if you can find something that you're deeply passionate about to start a business from, right? So you mentioned about wakeboarding earlier on, like um let's think of, like, let's see if we can think of 10 different things that you could do with wakeboarding, right? Imagine if you had a passion of wakeboarding and photography, where you can go out and take photographs at your local lake of people wakeboarding, right? Or maybe I don't know, the kit that, if I don't know, imagining that lakes could be quite dirty and people have got either wetsuits or their boards get dirty or things like that, so you could have like a wakeboard cleaning service. When they dock back up, you grab their board, you grab their wetsuit, you rinse them off, whatever. Okay, so there's business idea number two. Third business is you could just sell wakeboards. Business number four, if you've got a design side of things, you could design like funky, like graphic stencils for like wakeboards. Maybe there's like injuries that people get through wakeboards, so you could have like injury prevention like things. What are we at, 5 ideas now? Do you want me? I could carry on if you want me to. Right. Do you want me to try and come up with another 5? You could push me.
I I mean, yeah, just this is truly what makes incredible content, right? Because it's real. So, yeah, I mean, if you have more, but you don't have to you don't have to get to the point of stress.
Wakeboard ropes, wakeboard repair kits. So that's 7. Look, I could carry on. Chat GPT.
Stickers that you put on your
Yeah,
wakeboard.
there you go. So even you're coming up with them now, which is great. So Chat GPT is a great thing to do. If you go into Chat GPT and you put, I love soccer, I'm thinking about quitting my job and starting up a business. Can you give me 10 business ideas for somebody who's passionate about soccer? And Chat GPT will just do its thing. So that's kind of the first thing, is like, let's just find something passionate about, come up with a few ideas. Then what we want to do is we want to test those ideas to see like whether they actually keep water or not. So there's 3 questions which I always get people to ask around their ideas. So imagine you've made a list of those 10 ideas now, and then you've got 4 columns next to it. So the 3 questions, and then we're going to have a total box for the other 4 columns. So question number 1 is like, how much do I love this idea on a scale of 1 to 10? So it could be like photography. Yeah, I'm kind of moderately passionate about photography, but actually I could kind of take it, leave it, somewhere 5 out of 10. But injuries, like, it's nothing worse than seeing like, kids just starting out on the wakeboards and picking up injuries and then they lose their passion for it. So actually I'd love to, like, I'm like 9 out of 10 on that, like doing that, because that'll make a really big difference. So how passionate am I about it? Second thing is, what kind of results can I get for my clients? Again, on a scale of 1 to 10. So you might be deeply passionate about it, but you might be rubbish at it, right? So you want to start to get a balance of like which ones are scoring the highest on average. It's rare that you'll get like 10, 10, 10, although it has happened. And then the third question is, can I make some money from this on a scale of 1 to 10? Right. So I don't know how much demand there is for wakeboarding and how much money you can make from leashes, but it might be like, oh, actually, I'm really passionate about the handles on the leashes and, designing new styles for it and the threads and like the tension in it and things like that. That's really cool. But actually, like, the unit profit on it is like, I don't know, $10. And so you've got to sell so many units that it becomes overwhelming, right? So maybe we'll park that product. And ideally, then what we want is toss up all of the scores and we pick the one with the highest score across those 3 metrics. And you can also put in your own criteria into that as well. Then what we want to do is, a lot of people again make the mistake, like they just go full gas. They're like, right, I'm going to invest everything into this. And it has to be perfect. So I'm going to release 10 leashes, but they have to be like custom designed and perfect, and the packaging's got to be this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, just like, you've got to figure out whether actually the market wants this thing now, right? So you have the best idea, and your mum's there saying, "Yeah, go on, Robin, this is a great idea. You should go and do it." But then, and you spend time perfecting these products, like 12 months of your life and tens of thousands of dollars, and then you take it to the shops and the manufacturers, and they're just like, nobody wants this. So testing the market as early as possible. This is part of the oversubscribed approach, which you talked about, Dan Priestley, one of his books. You can create something called a wait list. So what you do is, the likelihood is, if you're into wakeboarding, you have a community of people around you who like wakeboarding as well. So what you do is you reach out to some people in your community and you say, listen, I'm thinking about this, setting up this business, doing customized leashes that can be to like your weight, your tension, and size of grip and all this sort of stuff. would you be interested in buying a custom leash from me? And if so, how much would you be think you would be a fair amount of money? And if you end up with 100 people on that wait list, and they've all ticked, yeah, this sounds amazing. We'd love a custom leash, and we'd be willing to spend, $60 on it to get the best of the best. Well, there's $6,000 worth of latent demand there that we can start to tap into. And maybe a successful month for the first launch is to sell $1,000 worth of leashes. So we do small increment. We test the market. We build a wait list. So we create demand. We get people excited. Now we've got an audience. We do some kind of a launch campaign, and we set a realistic goal of, like, I don't know, selling 20 leashes, and see if we can achieve that or not. And if there's too much resistance to the way, there's something called product market fit. You can have a really good idea in the wrong market. You can have a really strong market, but just wrong product. The goal is to get a good fit, and knowing when to stop is quite important. Because I'm just trying to think of an example. I had a client recently who was just she was trying to sell LinkedIn marketing, so like personal branding, but into the construction space. They desperately need it. They can afford it because there's a lot of money in construction. They didn't get a value in it. Like, no matter, they kind of went, it sounds cool. I think I kind of need that, but they weren't like sold on it. So it was like pushing jelly up a hill for her to actually grow that as a business. Pivoted into entrepreneurs, however, who know that LinkedIn is like hot property, and to get their personal brand out there and connect with lots of people. And we tweak the pricing structure a little bit to suit entrepreneurs. All of a sudden, she's like got enough demand out of it that it's like, so that product market fit is like massively important. But knowing when to back out of one market and try your product on another is important too.
Well, like I said right at the beginning of that question, I think that'll be life changing for people. And I know naturally we'll have to wrap pretty soon. We could go on about these topics forever, especially because we're so, like I said, people who love nerding out about this stuff. I think that was such a really good summary, and especially the validation part, making sure that it works with a small bet first is something that I definitely both well, learned the hard way for sure, but also really found one of the biggest things that I needed in my journey to figure out. And the other thing before we do wrap that I'm interested in and brings a lot of this stuff full circle is the idea of niche or niche. And I say that because you are a very multi-passionate person. Clearly, you could probably think of 1,000 business ideas, yet you are able to focus, at least for now, on fearless. Um, do you think that the brand that you are building is something that you will stick with only forever and create different things, like you said, the wakeboarding rope and stickers and designs and injury prevention, all that, like pillars within fearless? Or do you feel like you will also create other companies in your future?
So I have an accidental company which I started during lockdown, which was in content marketing, and that seems to be going quite well. So I kind of stepped a little bit back into the agency space, so that's quite fun. But again, it's based on my personal brand. It was just like we have sponsorship space in my blog, and it just seems that it's hot, like, again, hot property. It's just worked. It happened very organically. The fearless brand is quite yeah, I'll always have this brand. I'll always be coaching. I can't see myself starting up too many businesses outside of that coaching space. Um, what's interesting about the Fearless brand, though, for example, is you'll notice it's quite a surfy sort of brand. So I got known for wearing this brand called Salt Rock, which is a British like surfing brand, basically, with like similar sort of style writing. And so I created this brand initially. Well, I had somebody help me with it, Satna. She was absolutely brilliant, a branding expert. And she was like, what sort of things are you interested in? Like, and I was like, well, surfing and cycling, like, love being in the ocean and stuff like that. And I like these Salt Rock t-shirts. He's like, well, great. That's a really important part of your identity. That's put it in a logo. And then literally, if you stand still for long enough, Justin, I've got a stamp here, and I'll stamp your forehead with my Fearless logo. I put my logo, as you can see, like wherever I can, because I'm really proud of it. But I started to notice something quite interesting, because I have this edgy side with, like, I've surfed like 12 foot waves in Morocco. I've been down a local categorized climb on my push bike at 52.5 miles an hour, so I have this slightly edgy side to me outside of my coaching. And I noticed my clients that I attract, like I've got one client who does ultra marathons, and she's off, like she does like 100 plus mile like ultra marathons quite frequently, in various different countries around the world. I've got another client who she got divorced during lockdown, and as part of her, like, finding herself again, she started doing wild camping on Dartmoor, which is like nothing out there apart from like, bogs and stuff like that, on her own. And I'm like, wow, God, power to you. That's like incredible. So I've noticed all of my fearless crew have like this slightly edgy side to them. And you started the question asking about niche, and this is something that people just don't get about niching. Even so-called marketing experts, gurus, they'll start off with like demographics, like, well, we target middle-aged men in their 40s who live in Gloucestershire, right? So the basic stuff, and they think, oh, look at me, look how clever I am. I just did caught. That's a niche. No, there's a layer beneath that, which is psychographics. Like, how do we show up in the world? How do we behave? Like, what magazines do we read? What types of people do we hang out with? Like, what events do we go to? What books do we read? What podcasts do we listen to? All that sort of stuff. But then there's this like sub layer, this identity layer, which I was just talking about. And you need all three elements of that, like when you're trying to decide who it is that you want to work with. Because is it any wonder that I get clients who are kind of like similar to me, in many respects, and they're great fun to work with when you find them. We have a great laugh in the Fearless crew. I've just wrapped up before this our weekly call, and it's like, yeah, there's the business side of it, but we try and make it as fun and like easy and effortless to like go through the coaching process as we possibly can together. And again, it's not for everybody, and that's fine. I'm comfortable with that.
I think that's a really special, pretty well mic drop moment because for me, I struggled with that literally for years. Wouldn't even be an overstatement of like, okay, what is my niche? And to an extent, I still don't have it figured out, but it's a lot more clear that we can create specific demographic, psychographic opportunities through campaigns or different pillars within our overall business, but that our overall business has a lot more to do with, like Simon Sinek's start with why, our values, and our identity. And I can really see that coming into shape for myself too. I
Mm.
think that will be another one of those huge light bulb moments for people when it comes to this. Um, there are sometimes episodes that we do on this show where I'm like, man, with this person, I could create weekly episodes and we would have infinite stuff that we could talk about. I had shared about, had jotted down the idea of talking about being an author and writing books and storytelling, getting a little more into what it's like trying to be a parent and build a business. And the list goes on about things that we could.
Mm.
Um, Tackle, even talking about education and growing up, going to private school versus what you maybe want your kids to face when it comes to school, or should they go into business? Should they create social media content? At what age, etc.? I could go on about the topics we could talk about.
Yeah.
I list those out because we do have to wrap, and I love to ask some bullet rapid fire questions quickly. But before I do, if you since we're going to leave for a while, it might be some time before we collaborate again. Um, just making sure that if there was something you still thought we should share to be complete today, is there anything that we sort of left out or anything?
Yeah, the one sort of message I would share to sort of wrap things up with would be that a lot of people, you might be listening to this with a thought or an idea about a thing that you should be doing, and it's been ruminating, flashing around your head for months, potentially years, and the only way you're ever going to know whether that idea is a good one or not is to get out there and JFDI, just fucking do it. And I think a lot of people put themselves through a lot of mental anguish holding on to these thoughts because they think it's a big scary world out there. It's really not. That really, in I think Western civilized culture again, especially, like, there's nothing to be afraid of. You might lose a bit of money or look a bit dumb, but probably within like 24 hours, people will get on with their lives and forget about whatever it was that you tried to do. Me, I would always much rather know, like, give something a shot and know whether it works or not, than sit putting myself through the pain of suffering and thinking about it for like goodness knows how long.
Boom. Mic drop. So when it comes to the rapid fire questions, could be off topic, but what is one thing that you are learning right now?
I am getting back into YouTube, and I've hired a company to actually like hold me to account and teach me properly like how to grow my channel. So that's quite exciting because I've kind of I'd say half-assed it to this point. Now I actually want to do it properly. So yeah, doubling down on YouTube.
That's really cool. I think it's arguably the best medium out there. I know you've been in Ali's studio recording and having that experience and seeing the benefits that it can have for people. But I also think it's one of the highest barriers to entry. Why it's just why it's so valuable. So that makes me happy for you. I look forward to checking those videos out. I'm like a filmmaker at heart, so it's something that I definitely have on my bucket list too. Um, One piece of advice, being a girl dad, I'm sure this is something you think about sometimes, but if you could leave just one piece of advice for the next generation, what would it be?
Two words: let them. And I'll have to rationalize that because most people would be like, "What? What does that mean?" So, especially as girl dads, I want to protect my girls like nothing is going to come anywhere near them or hurt them, or like, I'm going to be there every moment, the minute of the day, like watching over them. And like, you can be overly protective as a parent, especially if you're a dad with daughters. um, and there's nothing better than when they have insights that they've developed their own, and the only way to get those is to stop parenting them and just let them be themselves and be kids and explore. So whenever they're doing something a bit dumb, or they're doing something really cool and constructive, or whatever it might be, and I feel like I should interfere, I have to just go, no, no, just let them be. And I've found myself now, my wife as well, she's getting on board with this. It's like, no, no, just hold your horses. Just let's see how this plays out.
It's like 80 words, but
Sorry, yeah.
but the two
Rapid fire, sorry.
really will stick in
Let
people's
them.
memories now. Yeah. Let them. Now that they know what it is, it'll stick in their memories. And I'm sure you are definitely creating innovators and good people by having that philosophy. So that's awesome. We pass the microphone across the world here, and you're able to ask me a question as the host. Again, could be on this topic that we've been on or otherwise, but what is a question that comes to mind for me?
I'm curious. What are you most excited about?
Downstream of the work that I've put into building this podcast and a brand when it comes to just keep learning is the goal of improving people's mental health. And that's probably similar to what is part of your values with building out Fearless, but it's been a shit ton of work and learning for myself to really push this boulder like slowly up the hill without seeing many signs and signals, like little ones that there's like kind of success coming. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but
Mm,
not many. And having to do that on my own for a long time and kind of figure it out and decide, is it the right thing to work on? I've been pushing this boulder up the hill, figuring out some of the technical things about like how to even create a podcast and all the things that go into it that I don't need to bore people with, but ultimately pushing that boulder up the hill. And I do feel like there is reasonable amount of evidence and belief that pretty soon I'm able going to tip that boulder down the hill, let it roll down, and when that happens, some of my dreams to uh, be able to do some of this a little more full time, but most importantly, to have people kind of get it in terms of what I'm working on, and then apply it to their own lives, and go pursue their own goals, have clarity around how to start their own businesses and just achieve success themselves, in turn creating mental health for them, is something that gets me really excited. And that's a bit meta and broad. Within that, on the micro, I've finally, and I know this is something else you can relate to, like been able to find a bit of a system to actually write my book that I've been working on, but I'm making a lot of progress every 24 hours, and that really gets me excited right now.
Mm. So, can I share something with you?
Of course, I'm on your clock.
um, there was something which you shared there about you touched on it, that pushing that boulder up a hill and who you're really doing that for. It's okay for it to just be for you for now.
I like that.
Because I think sometimes like we feel we have to have this massive purpose and everybody needs to know about it. But sometimes like it's okay for it to be about you until you get to a point where boulder tips off the edge and you're stood at the top of the hill, standing strong, saying, "Hey, who's going to join me?"
I like that. And I need to go for a walk and think of a little bit of how that relates to me, like in pragmatic terms. But it makes me think of something that we talked about midway through this episode where I said, when I do figure some of this stuff out, I'll have those tears in my eyes big time, similar to some of your clients.
Mm,
And that was a lot more personal, that moment of reflection,
yeah.
because when you were talking about being in the boardroom with the stale, pale males, it made me think of like going to job interviews at any time over the last bunch of years. I've almost tuned out halfway through because I'm like, I, I don't, I don't want this job. uh, and I'm like, damn.
Mm,
But figuring it out in this, which is why it's amazing, and means so much to us, can be difficult. That boulder takes a long time to push. So I appreciate you saying that because
yeah.
definitely there is a huge personal element to it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really easy to. I think it's a human thing where we deflect and kind of make it about other people, but it's okay to feed ourselves. Like if it's not harmful or hurting anybody else, and it interests us, and we feel there's some value there in that introspection. Like, oh, we could go 7 layers deep into this. I'll try not to. I'll try to keep it brief. Like even something as basic as like, there's you here. If I could touch you, I would be touching your heart. There's you, like what sits at the heart of you. But then there's another version of you, which is like how you show up for other people. That's different to how you are as a person, right? Because now other people are involved. Then there's Justin and how Justin shows up for other people. And Justin is different to you. So we have like onions, we have all these different layers to us, but most of it is about what's going on out here, not necessarily just with people, but just our external circumstances and other things that we think are important. That introspection I'm talking about is like getting to know you in that process of pushing that boulder up a hill, and that's okay to spend a lot of time there and do it in a way that's like guilt-free time off. So when I did that exercise and that little bit of peace, it's okay to focus on getting that little bit of peace for you and taking it from like a tenth of a second to 0.2 and gradually eking it out. And then I don't know if you do this already, but like take a Friday off, go and have a massage, go and get on your wakeboard, go and whatever it is that you're passionate about, go and do it, but give yourself the permission to enjoy it.
This brings us back to the very first sentence of this entire episode, talking about those four pillars.
Mm,
And one of the things was wealth and what that means. And I asked you to define it later on. And the reason was, well, the first time that I listened to Naval's 3+ hour podcast about, he called it How to Get Rich. And he says in there at about the 1 hour mark, I should have called this How to Get Wealthy, but it wasn't as good for the catchphrase, the hook point, the tagline, because people want to get rich. But it's really about
yeah.
wealth. And that's something that I personally have really struggled to figure out. And I've often felt like, well, once I figure that out, then I can take the day off and go golfing.
Oh, that's a rival fallacy. Look that up. It's called a rival fallacy, right? So it's not like that at all. Go on. Sorry, I spoke over you.
No, that's perfect. That arrival fallacy is what, if people happen to listen to this entire episode, might actually help them the most
How do you get strong biceps?
by doing pull ups, deadlifts, and curls.
Yeah, and you don't just go once and we're ripped. How many times do you have to go?
Takes years.
Yep. Guilt-free time off is no different. It's just another muscle that you have to exercise, and it takes a heck of a lot of like workouts to get there. And sometimes it may be good, and sometimes it may be bad. Sometimes it may hurt your legs, like I experienced on Sunday. I had leg day, and it hurt, and it still hurts. But we're going to persevere. We're going to carry on going through it. And on other days, it'll be easier, and it won't hurt as much. It's the same with guilt-free time off. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard.
Well, if we were closer together in terms of geography, I would definitely say let's go golfing this afternoon. Or we'd have to figure out the time zones. Where are we playing? But
I know I wrote a book about golf. I am the rubbish golfer. I love it. It's fun, but like it just takes too long. I make people really frustrated because my balls just go everywhere. So
wow, it'd be a lot of fun. And that would play into my brand of hanging with people who just really try something they suck at.
and wakeboarding. You could have a good laugh if you stuck me on a wakeboard. I think I'd get it eventually with the surfing experience, but I know it's a very different sport. So
It's been a long time since I've done that too. And this has been awesome. Like I said, we could go on many layers and talk about many topics, create an entire show, to be honest. I just really appreciate working with you. It means a lot that you took the time to do this. Most importantly, I know it'll have a lot of impact on people as they find this episode. The last question is always why, as well as where people should go, could go to find your work.
well, I'm sure if people are a little bit curious and have questions, that's a good reason why. Just go and connect with me on LinkedIn and shoot me a message, and I'll always reply to those. And quite often it will be with a voice note, giving my thoughts and some pearls of wisdom, hopefully. And then I've also, like I said, I've got a gift for everybody. So I've got some signed copies of my book, Take Your Shot, as well. So those hopefully we'll be able to, I'll share the link with you as well to put in the show notes, but it's fearless.biz/TYS for Take Your Shot. Just put a few details into there, and then I take great pride in personally signing that, taking it down to Pauline at the post office and shipping them. I don't care where you are in the world as well. And if you can't afford postage, shipping's on me. So there's an option for that in there too.
Well, that's awesome. Very generous of you. I appreciate you so much. And until the next time we create together, all the best.
Awesome. It's been my pleasure.